Hello and welcome to Masala Podcast. I have with me someone who I've liked and admired for a very long time. I love her content. I love what she talks about, what she stands for, actually, more than anything else. Welcome to Masala Podcast, Poorna.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so long overdue. I'm so sorry
I
for taking this
know.
long.
Don't worry. I think we've been talking for what, 2 years, maybe?
I think so, thereabouts,
I
yeah.
think you were one of the first people I contacted actually when I had the idea. I remember being in a hotel room and it was with Spotify and we were pitching the idea. And, one of the things was, who would you like as a guest? And you popped up into my head. And I think I'd emailed you then. So this is like not even 2.5 years, I think now.
Yeah, I have loved what you stand for and what you've been doing from the very beginning. And most importantly, I was like, oh my God, a South Asian woman that actually addresses and talks about sex. And that's an incredible thing because it was so needed. And it still is something that's very needed in terms of a conversation that we're having around things. So yeah, no, huge admirer of yours.
No, thank you so much. That means a lot. So let's start. Tell me a little bit about you, where you grew up, what your background is.
So, a little bit about me is I'm an author and a journalist, and also I know we'll get to this, but I'm also an amateur powerlifter, which is my favorite hobby and probably one of the only hobbies that has stuck consistently throughout my life. I've published 3 nonfiction books, and I am coming out with my debut fiction in a couple of months, which I'm very, very excited about because, given the theme of the podcast, it features a South Asian female protagonist, and it was really important for me to write a woman who reflects the people that I know versus sometimes in the past when I've seen caricatures, let's say, of South Asian women depicted. And I would say that my background, I'm Indian, specifically South Indian, which for me is a really important thing to say. And I have lived both in India and in England. So I was born in England. And then when I was about 7 years old, my parents decided that it would be a really good idea to relocate back to India. And we weren't supposed to come back. But I think after about 5 years of this, my dad just realized that he couldn't really deal with working there because he is a retired doctor. And so we all came back. So I spent, a lot of my primary school years and my formative years in India, and then my entire secondary education in England.
That's such an interesting combination, isn't it? So, seven to what year? How old were you when you came back?
I was 12 when we came back.
12. Wow. So, that's like a really crucial time, isn't it? Because thinking back to when I was that age, you're kind of almost forming your identity. So, then if you're kind of going between these two dramatically different places, let's face it, that must have been quite something. Was it easy to adjust when you came back?
No, not at all. I think that it was easy to go there because, I was 7 when we went there, and the experience was predominantly positive, because it was positive reinforcement in terms of, oh my gosh, I go to school and everyone looks like me and I don't feel like I stick out or that there's a part of my identity that just doesn't quite fit in with everyone else. And also, I got the sort of wonderful opportunity to grow up with my cousins, which I don't think we would have had a chance to do had we decided to stay here. And those are relationships, that have withstood a lot of years. And I think that coming back, however, was very different. You're coming into secondary school, which is a difficult age anyway. A lot of the people in secondary school might have known each other previously from having gone to primary school together, and I didn't have that. But also, I think for me, and definitely this is the case for others, is that that's when definitions around your identity become really heightened, and anything that is viewed as being different, especially back then, I think it's easy to forget this now when for example, my background is my parents are Hindu, and I think it's very difficult to imagine that excuse me. I
That's
think it's very
okay.
difficult to imagine that we don't celebrate Diwali, but back then we didn't. It was just something we did behind closed doors, you know, or with community members. And we had no community here, basically. So that was a really odd experience, because I personally just felt like I didn't really fit in anywhere. And because my sister and I had had this different upbringing to other British born South Asians, we didn't fit in with them here either. And my sister, very interestingly, her name is Priya Joy. She is writing a book around motherhood and around this entire period of our lives. So I'm so interested to see this massive part of my identity reflected in her writing, because I've never really articulated that part of it before.
Yeah, it's really interesting hearing you speak, because what you say about never quite fitting in, I never felt that either. So I grew up in India, spent most of my kind of adult life in India, moved here when I was about 30 something, early 30s. But this feeling of not belonging, when I grew up in India, and I was, that is the mainstream kind of, I look like pretty much everybody else. And I wonder often if that's to do with an internal thing as well. So one is external, obviously. If people don't look like you feel like you don't fit. And when I moved to the UK as well, I don't feel like I belong. And I've always felt like I am disconnected from the place I'm in. So it's just thinking out loud, something that I've thought about. Tell me, I mean, just that's so interesting that you grew up, or you spent those years, 7 to 12 in India. Was that in Bangalore? For some reason, I seem to think
That
it's
was in
Bangalore.
Bangalore. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I
what.
think one of your posts says Bangalore, and that's where I lived for many, many years. So I know Bangalore really well. And then coming back to the UK, where was it that you came back to?
So my family are based in Kent,
Kent.
and they've been in Kent for pretty much the entire time that they've lived in the
Yeah,
UK.
yeah. So what changed? What are the things that change on a daily basis from your life in Bangalore to your life in Kent?
I would say one of the things, well, one of the biggest things, which is the case at that age, is school. So,
Mm.
coming from an environment in India where intelligence is something that's respected, where if you do well in school, that's something that other people look up to you for. And then you come to England and you realize, oh no, those are the people whose heads are getting flushed down the toilet. Like you can't really display any sort of skill or achievement or signs of intelligence, because those are the people that get, picked on or bullied, which was a horrendous kind of adjustment, because you are literally having to dim your own light to be able to fit in with the rest of your school friends or schoolmates. And so that was one of the significant differences, food obviously being another one. I mean, I completely agree with you, and I take your point in terms of, even if you are living in a country where everyone looks like you may not fit in. And I think that, for me, that's why it's really important to connect with people who share the same ethics as you, and who just resonate your line of thinking. Not to suggest that people should be in an echo chamber, but I feel that that's a really important part of things. But there are things that, you would not have to think twice about in India, the kind of your mother's food being in the fridge, and what if your friends come over, or does your house smell of curry when your friends come over? Do your clothes smell like that? Because those are all things that you get picked on for. And then there are other things, such as, literally everything. When you turn your TV on, there is no one who looks like you. Bollywood was not on mainstream TV at all back then, let alone, South Asian actors. And so on the one hand, you've got this sort of this sense of moving about in society, and there's just nothing that really reflects part of who you are. And even when you do find things in pop culture, or, whether that's music or whatever it is, you can love it, you can appreciate it, it can be part of who you are, but it's still a fundamental difference. You're having a different experience than it is for some of your white friends. And those were some of the differences. Also, parenting is a huge one. Culturally, we have stricter parents. Like the concept that I would leave my house and my parents not know where I was going was something that was just routine for some of my friends. It definitely wasn't for me, or just being back home, before it got dark and so on. The one thing I will credit my parents with is that they never really told me what to wear. Like that was always a part of my creativity and self-expression, that I was allowed to just do whatever I kind of wanted within, within reason. But that was something I really appreciate, because some of the stuff that I used to wear back then, I just think, oh wow, like, kudos to them for not saying anything, because some of it was terrible.
So what does identity feel like now? I know
I
that's a really big question. What does that feel
Identity
like?
for me feels like honesty, because one of the things back then was, and this is something I've written about, before, was when I was growing up, I had two different accents. So I would have an Indian accent, which I spoke with at home, and then I would have an English accent that I spoke with at school and with my friends. And the English accent came out of necessity, because I just needed people to not look at me, like I'd just crawled out from under a rock, which is what they did in my first week. And I just wanted to be accepted, and I wanted to make friends. And I just thought my accent has to go, because this is the thing that's like, holding me back. And I feel so sad that I thought that back then. But I hate to say it was true, because the minute I started talking like them, I was accepted into their friendship circles. But of course, that part of me hadn't really caught up with the part of me at home. So I would say back then it was the fear of being found out about things that I shouldn't have had to feel ashamed about, or I shouldn't have felt like I needed to hide it. And identity to me now feels like being honest in every single part of my life, and being able to be honest with my friends and family about who I am, whatever aspect of that may take. And so the accent that you hear now is exactly the same accent that I use with my parents. And I don't feel afraid, because there isn't this massive part of me that's just locked away. But it also includes being really proud of stuff. So it's not just feeling neutral, it's being really proud that that I'm South Indian, that I'm South Asian, and being open and bold about that, and supporting other people who also need that help and that support.
That's absolutely wonderful. I think so many things you said there really resonated with me. One was the accent. So I do this thing. If somebody calls from India, my accent becomes more Indian.
Same.
Like sudden, and I've done this in offices. And they're like, you sound really Indian on the phone. And I'm like, yeah, I don't even know I'm doing it, but I guess there's this inherent need to fit in wherever that might be. So if I'm working in an organization that's English, then I become more English. I'm in a meeting and I want to sound like I fit. And it's just bizarre. And even on the phone, like it used to always make me laugh. Like, why is my accent changing on the phone? Um, but yeah, I guess the bigger point is that trying to fit in. And what you said, the other thing that made me really sad, it's like some parts of you that are very much a part of you need to be hidden in order to fit within the broader culture. I mean, that's so sad, right?
It's incredibly sad. I mean, I think that, it's difficult to articulate some of this stuff to my peers, especially my white peers, because you're articulating stuff that you feel desperately sad about, but that you can't change, but that still inform the person that you are today. So, when people wonder, and I don't know if you've had the same thing, when people wonder why we feel so passionately about things, like why we are so vocal and outspoken about things, it's because there was a really fundamental time where we didn't feel that we could be like that. And we were definitely not alone in that experience. We talk to people, that's part of both of our jobs. And the more you talk to people, the more you realize how common this was an experience. And I hold a lot of sadness around that. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit in that. I'm going to use that to try and make things a little bit different, or to be outspoken, or to try and kind of even that, balance out a little bit. And but I don't know what to do with some of the regret of that, because I also know that some of that behavior um, came from a place of wanting to survive, and being okay, and having friends and having a full life. And I did have that to an extent. It's just a real shame that it had to come, at a cost of sequestering off a really important part of myself, I think.
Absolutely. And I think things like, when you were talking, I was thinking of food. There was, I first remember coming to the UK and I was working at this job. and I made some prawn curry and rice, I think, and I was going to take it to work. And I remember the people we were staying with at that point, my ex and I, "You're going to smell up the office, are you?" And I'm like, it had never occurred to me that the food I eat would be considered smelling anything up. I was like, but that's just food and
Mm.
my food. And I remember feeling a little bit like that sense of shame that starts in your stomach. And you're like, oh God, the thing I am, and that's such a part of me, is going to smell something up, you know?
Especially food for us isn't just
Yes,
food. Food for us,
exactly.
those people, when they're saying that, they insult us, they insult our mothers, they insult our entire family. And I don't mean that to sound in such a like mafioso kind of way, but it's true. I mean, it
Yeah,
it goes beyond just I'm insulting your lunch or your dinner, right?
yeah,
And that feels like such a huge thing. And that's what I mean about that, people not understanding and not understanding where some of our behavior comes from is from experiences like that, from, watching a lot of American TV where that's used as a punchline in jokes, like Indian food or South Asian food having a strong smell is used as a punchline. Um, and that's a really hard thing.
yeah.
Then in your present day, have people who are really excited about it, who want to tell you how much they like Indian food, or
Yes.
good God, like the number of like men that I've dated who want to tell me about the curry that they've cooked. Like these are like, let's say, white men. And I'm like, I mean, good for you, but I just don't really want to hear it. It doesn't mean anything to me because there is this part of myself that was deeply
Yeah.
insulted around it. And I
Yeah.
still don't feel 100% okay
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah. No, I completely, completely get it. And I think what you said, food is a very emotional thing for South Asian people. I don't know a single South Asian person that doesn't get excited, doesn't get emotional over food. And I think in a lot of Western society, food is functional. I mean, definitely kind of old school British society. I think it's probably changing now, but it's a functional thing. And for us, it's a very emotional thing. It's very deep to who we are, I think.
It is. I mean, even when you were just saying prawn curry and rice, I was like, oh my God, that sounds so delicious.
Yeah,
But it made me think about my mother making prawns. It
yeah,
made me think about the type of prawn curries that I like to cook. It's not
yes.
just you telling me about something that you decided to have to eat for lunch that day.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Tell me, what are the bits of South Asian culture that really resonate with you? Food. I'm sure we could talk about food for the whole podcast. What else? What are the bits that make you happy, that make you feel like part of that identity?
I think the biggest thing probably is how hospitable we are. Definitely that. The fact that I would say this is part of my Indian identity because I feel like in India, it's just things are more fluid and they're less intense, and you don't have to book something in with someone, 5 to 10 weeks in advance. And in terms of socializing, I just find the pace of it a lot easier to deal with than here, where everything, in the UK, where everything needs to be so ordered and structured. But I like the fact that you could just invite someone over to your house and it not be, this big deal. I like the fact that we make a lot of food so that, it's not about having, a set number of, I don't know, fish fingers or whatever per plate. I like the fact that I feel like, that the parts of us that really love music and dance and color and sound and, just conversations with each other about lots of different things. And I think the thing that this doesn't make me sad, it's just that I wish it was just better represented are those conversations that, I will have with my other like Indian friends and the things that we talk about and the topics that we dissect versus what I see, in scripts on
Yes.
TV, which just doesn't seem to reflect the kind of people that we are. I feel like I'm looking at an experience that is happening to someone else rather than going, oh my gosh, that's exactly like it is for us. So that's what I would probably say the aspects of for me, South Asian culture are definitely the hospitality part of it is something that I think we're really known for, and also just helping people out, that you don't necessarily need it to be a family member. It could be, we all know the like uncle and auntie who's not really an uncle and auntie, or the friend of a friend and so on. And I really like that aspect of things, of having family that extends beyond just your blood relatives.
It's almost a generosity, isn't there? Whether it's food, whether it's kind of including people within your life, opening your life and the resources you might have, whatever that is, food, your time, emotions, to other people. And I think you and I have spoken on social media, like on DMs about this. Like the thing I miss the most, I think, living um, from my Indian kind of life is the openness to people. Like I really miss that. You know, when you meet people, you meet someone and they're like, "Oh, come over for chai." You know, it's such a casual, easy thing. Whereas in the UK, I find, maybe it's a London thing, I don't know, that it's a lot more formal. To kind of make connections is so much harder. Like I moved to Bangalore and I'm not from Bangalore. And within, I think, 2 weeks, I had this huge set of friends. And they're still my friends to this day. I've been in the UK, what, 16 years? I still don't have those connections. That kind of openness to other people, openness to, I don't know, really letting people in is something I really, really miss.
Yeah, I think that being in London doesn't help for
Mm.
sure, because it's a big city, and so when you're saying to someone, do you want to meet for coffee, if you don't live roughly
Mm.
on whatever side of the river, it's just difficult. I mean, I do understand that, but there definitely is that lack of openness here, that I do miss about being in India. And what I think it is when I think about the friendships that have just taken root really quickly, um, funnily enough, they're not with people who are English. They tend to be people who might be from Europe, or, let's say people who are from Scotland and or Ireland and so on. And I don't know, I feel like people get in their own heads around things. They imagine it's like going on a date with someone who's worried that you might think a date means that you want to marry them. It's coffee. Like, if you don't get on, it's fine. You
Exactly.
you don't have to, it doesn't mean that you're gonna, like, buy the house next door to them and then just move in. Like, I feel like people preempt that, and I think that because, yes, it's a trope, but it's one that stems from, a lot of experiences I've had in this country, where I just don't think people are honest about how they feel, and so everyone hides behind this veneer of politeness and nicety. If you don't want to do something, don't do it. If you don't want someone over, don't have them over. Like, I just think that this sort of need to be seen as nice, or this need to be polite all the time, trips them up. And so, yes, of course, it's harder to socialize, because they're worried that if they reach the point where they don't want to socialize, they don't know how to say no. And that I've found has been the case throughout my entire life. But I'm very much the kind of person who will tell you, or be honest, or be open about things. So, yeah, so I don't know if that helps other people. I'm not too sure. But when I sense that someone's not really being honest with me about their emotions and their feelings, I find it very hard to sustain a relationship with them, or a friendship with them anyway. So,
No, I totally, totally get that. Let's talk a little bit more about the sporty side of things. Were you sporty, athletic, any of that when you were growing up?
when I saw this question on your list, I actually laughed out loud. So, so the answer is no. But it's an interesting one, because when I was in India, I wouldn't say I was, I mean, never was athletic as a child. And I don't know if I would describe myself as sporty, but I definitely was active, and whether that was riding your bikes around, playing with friends, just sort of, having a lot of fun, just moving around. And that was a really fond memory from that time. But I definitely remember being in secondary school when we moved back to England, and I just hated it, because the majority of how you're taught sport in school, at least in England, I'm not so sure about India, is that it's competitive sport. And if you are not particularly good at it, your teachers don't really have any interest in developing you further than that. And also, I just feel like the way we were taught about sport is that, they showed you how to do something once, and then you were expected to just go off on your own and do it. I mean, I'm talking about things like javelin, for example,
Wow.
which is crazy when you think that you're giving, like, that kind of implement to a 13 or a 14-year-old. Or doing things like rope climb, which is something, you know, that I talk about in Stronger, the book that I wrote about all of this stuff around physical activity. Which is that, you know, we were told, okay, for your assessment, do rope climb, and just how on earth would you be able to do that as a child, because you have like no upper body strength. So I definitely was not, and I really didn't like sport at all at school. And that kind of continued into my 20s, where yes, I did join a gym, but I can't say I really gave it much thought beyond, you know, kind of huffing away on a cross trainer or doing some work on the treadmill.
And I guess it's also, I don't know if this was your experience, but for me growing up, it was very much that the men were the kind of sporty type. They were encouraged to kind of play sport or be physically strong or active. And as women, we were told that we were the opposite of that in many ways. It's like you're the one who has to wait for the man to do the whatever, or you can't open a jar and you immediately get a man to open the jar. You know, it's that kind of conditioning almost. Um, did you get any of that when you were growing up, or was that not the case for you?
I mean, I definitely grew up with the conditioning that, you know, men were sportier.
Mm.
And, you know, my dad was a weightlifter, and it was definitely something that was mentioned, you know, at home or with extended family. But I don't remember the other men around him doing the same. You know, it was always something that was picked out as something that he specifically did. So I didn't grow up with that kind of conditioning, but for sure, you know, when I grew up and I was a bit older, um, I didn't really. It wasn't so much that it was like, oh, you need to wait for the man to do this or to do that. I don't think it was as overt as that, but neither did I think that there was anything wrong with this expectation or this understanding, you know, that men just did like heavy lifting, or men were the stronger ones by default, or any of that stuff. Like, I think I just took that as a given, you know. So when it came um to needing to confront that, and needing to confront the idea of, but hang on, I'm a feminist and I believe in equality, and but yet I also expected my husband to take out the bins because that's what men. And then I had to unravel it that way, and I was like, oh yeah, I believed that there were men's jobs and women's jobs, and if I believe that there are men's jobs, then yes, there are women's jobs. And that doesn't sit right with me, because okay, so when we unravel that, what are women's jobs? And if women's jobs are cooking and cleaning, then that person can just go to hell, because I don't believe in that. And that's absolute rubbish. So, but it was shocking to me, Sangeeta, how I did not really connect those dots and go, oh my God, like, I've been pushing for equality, for dismantling of like gender stereotypes around one thing, at the same time as fundamentally believing this other thing that supports those stereotypes. That was mind-blowing to me.
No, I think so many of us, we carry this stuff because it's all subconscious, isn't it? We're growing up, we're absorbing this information, whether that's family, media, books, whatever. And what's being fed to us is the same thing, that you're this as a woman or a man, and you can't be that. So obviously, we're going to pick that up. So let's talk about the thing I'm really fascinated about, Poorna the powerlifter. How did that start?
I mean, that was a slow journey. So I had started to dabble in learning how to lift weights. And because I just didn't know how to do any of that before. So that would be, you know, just learning how to lift a barbell and so on. And I had a personal trainer who just helped me with that. And that was a very, very different way of training that I had done before, which before it was always, you know, oh, I need to lose X amount of weight or whatever. And this, with this type of training, it was, I actually just need to get stronger. And so that's what I had been doing for a couple of years. And then I went traveling. And then when I came back, I needed to get a new PT because, you know, I'd quit my job. I was in a different area, and started to train with him. And at the same time, you know, and I'd noticed when I go into the weight section, you know, there was never really any women in that section. And it was fine, it was okay, but I would just keep myself to myself and just go in there and just leave, the minute my session was done. And one day when I was in there, this guy came up to me and started talking to me, and I'm really like, how would my dad describe it? Territorial and aggressive. I don't think that's true. It's just that I don't have a very approachable face in that section of the gym, because I don't want guys to start talking to me in that
Yeah.
section, right? I mean, who does? And this guy came and started talking to me, and I just thought, oh God, I just go away. But he actually said, we've got this powerlifting competition that's come up, and it would be really nice to get women to be part of it, because that might encourage other women. And that was the thing that made me actually pay attention to him. I think if he had worded it in any other way, I'd have just said, no, this, like, I don't even know what powerlifting is, go away. But I just thought, oh, okay, well, you know what, actually, it would be really nice to see more women in the weight section. And yeah, that would be a great thing to do. But the idea of it still absolutely terrified me. And then it so happened, again, by like coincidence, that my personal trainer, who is my coach, his name is Jack. He is actually a professional powerlifter, and he said, I actually think it would be a really good thing for you to try. You might really enjoy it, might have some fun with it, and then the rest is history. Like, I just remember thinking, I don't know what Jack's idea of fun is, but this doesn't sound fun. And it turns out that it was so much fun, and it connected me to a whole different community. And for the first time, I think, in my life, I actually really enjoyed going to the gym. And it wasn't something that was just about, oh, I need to like manage my weight, or I need to do this, or I need to do that. It was just about, am I having fun while lifting weights? Am I getting stronger every week? And then that was it, really.
Wow. So what does it feel like? Tell me, to lift that kind of weight. What does that feel like in the body and in the mind?
I think that when I'm actually doing it, I mean, that can depend. So when I'm actually doing it, I can either feel like I'm having the best day of my life. And if, I don't know, I'm tired, or it's just not going my way, the mental load, or like having to like psych yourself up to do those lifts, can take a lot, because you have to. I'm really glad I got a couple of my friends to try it, because it was really important to me that they understood that this wasn't just about what you're doing physically, that the mental load that's attached to it, in terms of having to psych yourself up to do it, is immense, right? But the thing is that all of that effort and all of that will counts towards something. And what that counts towards is how you feel when you are outside of that gym. And that could include like walking down the street, going into a meeting, being on a packed train, any one of those things. And it feels like a superpower. It's not something that's an aggressive kind of energy. It's not like a sense of superiority or anything like that. It's more just the understanding of the amount of work that you have put into yourself in a really positive and healthy way. And when I say healthy, I'm not talking about physical health, I'm talking about mental health here. And so it doesn't really matter like how much you can lift. It doesn't matter, whether those numbers sound impressive to other people. It's the accumulation of all of that work. And the fact that you've said to yourself, I am worth this. I'm going to take the time. I am going to work towards something because I want to, not because I'm working towards some aesthetics goal, or because I need people to think about me in a particular way. And that level of self-worth, Sangeeta, the self-confidence that gives you, because it's not a thing that can be taken away from you, because you have literally gone in there day after day and created that yourself. But that level of self-confidence it feels like titanium. Like, it feels like no one can kind of like move you from that point. And I'm immensely grateful to have found it, because I spent a lot of my life, the majority of my life, not feeling like that. So the fact that I managed to discover it in my late 30s, and now I'm in my early 40s, I'm immeasurably grateful for that.
Wow. Sounds incredibly powerful how you describe it. Like walking with the superpower almost, that sounds amazing. That must help emotionally a lot as well, right? So not only are you stronger physically, I guess I'm guessing you stand up stronger in the world and you take up space more in the world, but also emotionally that must be really, really, I guess, grounding in a way.
It's enormously grounding. I mean, if you speak to any powerlifter who will be able to talk to you and bore you to death about this for hours and hours on end, because we love talking about it, it is the thing that is such a metaphor for life, you know. So powerlifting, for people that don't know, involves three lifts, which is squatting with a barbell on your back, deadlifts where you're picking something up, and bench press where you're pushing something off your chest. And all of those movements are metaphors for, you know, when something weighs you down, when something seems like a burden, when it feels like the load is really, really heavy, you can carry it and you can lift it. And that is absolutely true. That is, it sounds so cheesy, but that is absolutely transferable to how you deal with things in life, because life isn't about always succeeding all the time. You know, like in the same way that you might go into a training session and fail because you might not lift the thing that you were intending to do, it teaches you that failure isn't something to be feared. It teaches you that actually that failure is going to teach you something the next time you attempt something else. And it's an opportunity to try something else, rather than going, you know what, no, I failed that. I didn't get that right. I'm not going to try it again, which I've definitely felt a lot during my life where something has scared me, or I just thought I didn't get it right the first time around, so I'm not going to try it again. It shows you that actually development and skill and learning takes a really, really long time. And it takes a lot of humility. Like, it takes a lot of humility to go, you know what, I didn't get it right that first time, but I'm going to go back. And even if I fail like 10 more times, I'm just going to keep trying until I get it right.
Wow, that's really amazing. How do other people respond to you powerlifting? Men, women, how do they respond to you?
It's hard to remember now, actually, because this
Mm.
is sort of my I've done 2 years of competing, and this is my I suppose, you know, this is technically my third year, but I didn't train for a year because of COVID. In the beginning, I got a lot of quote marks advice from men about how I needed to be careful, and loads of like injury stories, and this happened to my back or whatever. And then when I kind of unraveled it a little bit and said, okay, so thanks for the advice. Can I just ask, how did you learn how to lift? And in all of those cases, they didn't. They did that thing where they went into a gym and they were too proud to ask someone for help. And so they kind of taught themselves. And this is in an era before YouTube, by the way, you know, before we have this like massive access to all this information. So the people who had injured themselves, who were trying to give me advice about this, were not coached. They didn't have any professional help, and I'm doing this, and I have always done this with a coach. What I realized was that we aren't trained, even though they may do weights in a gym, we don't train the same way, you know. And they're not, and I think that when you train in a way that makes you an athlete, it's a very different type of training than I'm going to go to the gym to do a workout. And that's not to like, you know, that sounds a bit snobby on my part. I don't mean that at all. I just mean we all have different ways of training. So the people that I'm going to take advice from are the people who train in the same way as me. I think initially it did take a few people a bit of adjustment, because my physique looks different. It doesn't necessarily maybe look dramatically different, but the proportions of it, I've got like, you know, a weightlifter's body. But people just don't say anything now, because I think that they know that this isn't a phase. They know that I'm going to keep doing it, but also in a really nice way, actually. There is I'm achieving something. So I'm working towards something and I'm bettering myself. And even if you are the most cynical person, there's not really much anyone can say around that, because I'm the one who has been going to the gym and training and competing, you know, several times a week. I compete twice a year. So for someone who might go to the gym like 3 times a week and does their own thing or doesn't train in the same way, I think that after a while they just know that there's not really much that they can say to me about that. So I haven't really had really any comments in the last year. And I think after I had long COVID for about 10 months in 2020. So I think anyone who really knows me is just really happy for me, because I'm back to normal and I've been training for about a year. Yeah.
That's really, really Wonderful to hear. I'd love to talk about women and the ideas of strength and the ideas of, we've always talked about like emotional strength, but nobody really talks about physical strength with women. And I don't think, from what I know, girls are encouraged to be strong, really, young girls, and then growing up to be women. In fact, it's the opposite, where we're constantly told to kind of hate our own bodies, to be managing our bodies, to be managing our diet. Is this thing that must be kept under control, and it must be this particular weight and look this particular way. Has your idea of your kind of relationship with your body changed since you've been powerlifting?
Absolutely. I mean, we talked a little bit about me growing up in India and me having my Indian family. Um, I would say that as much as I love India and as much as I love my extended family there, being part of that specific culture around your body image was really difficult as a teenager. And it's difficult because, as you know, I'm sure, it is the first thing that people comment on when they haven't seen you for a while. And so it makes you so hyper aware, before you are in the company of people. Like before we used to go, so after we moved back to England, we'd go back to India periodically. And I just remember thinking, almost like dreading the moment when I knew that my body would be commented on. And I think I realized, somewhere maybe a few years ago, where I just realized that it didn't matter what size it was, whether it was, ridiculously skinny or, whether I put on weight or whatever, there was always just going to be a comment about it. And when I think back to when, people would say I'd put on weight or something, and I was like a size 8, which is incredible that they would find that to say about my body. I just realized, I think that, it doesn't matter. Their opinion doesn't matter, because their opinion will not kickstart anything positive in my life. All it will do is make me feel bad about myself. And I think the thing I will always be grateful to powerlifting is that it liberated me from that, basically. If my body is used for, if it has a purpose, if it has a sense of achievement about it, if I am moving it in a way that makes me feel good, then what someone else has to say about it is the least of my priorities or importance. And this idea, sometimes when I've said this to other South Asians, they're like, oh, but don't aren't we being like irresponsible by not saying anything? No, this isn't specific to me. This is like commenting on someone else's body, if they feel that that person needs to lose weight or whatever. And I said, it's none of your business. And also, if you care so much about it, maybe read some of the studies around this kind of stuff, and you'll find that never in the history of people deciding to voice an opinion about someone else's body was that the thing that, kickstarted whatever you're saying this like healthy, lifestyle needs to be. Like that, such a fundamental pillar of Stronger and writing it is to demonstrate that shaming other people, and more importantly, bending them to our ideas of what we think is healthy, what we think is, fitness should look like, or whatever. None of that is substantiated or corroborated by science, and it doesn't work on people. It's not a good motivator. So I think for me, my relationship with my body now is I feel neutral about it. There are days when I look at it and I'm like, damn, okay, you look great. There are days when I think, oh God, like I don't really want to look at myself in the mirror. And that's okay, because the days that I love my body and that I feel neutral about it is that those would grossly outweigh the days when I don't feel good about it. And that has taken a lot of work and a lot of releasing other people's expectations and opinions around it.
And it's not just other people. So within South Asian culture, as we've said, there's the aunties or whoever's commenting on your body. But outside of that, there's also kind of media, social media. It's so, like, I think about this a lot. There's so much kind of policing of our bodies. It's almost like the power of our bodies belongs to, it's an external thing, like other people are telling us. And there's so much that gets attached to how thin we are or big we are or whatever we are. And it's totally disproportionate. Like, I don't think men experience that to the degree that we do as women. And I don't even know how one starts to change that or even challenge that, you know.
I mean, I would say that there's a couple of things possibly, or rather, maybe I could say the things that helped me. I think one of the things that really helped was, I think, tackling my approach to food, for example. And a lot of that was around unraveling some of the diet culture stuff, which is fairly inescapable, right? If you live in
It
society.
is.
So just not feeling restricted around food, feel like understanding that food is a fuel that keeps me alive, and sort of reclaiming some of the joy in that rather than always, like, viewing it through a lens of restriction, means that I moderate a lot better now. So, I don't feel that I need to I don't know, eat something and feel guilty about it afterwards. I don't really feel guilty after eating anything. And that took quite a lot of work. But definitely with regards to being South Asian, I mean, I think a big part of it comes from representation in media and representation in social media. And definitely, I do a lot of work in the fitness space, and there are body sizes, for example, fitness influencers, that a lot of South Asian women are just not built like that. We have different genetics around certain things. And I think that when I sort of sat down and thought about it, and even like down to, clothes, for example, and clothes not being able to fit your bum properly and all of that kind of stuff. And I just was like, actually, but that's not a me problem. That's a you problem. Like that's a retailer's issue, and so for me, I've curated, number one, the places that I buy my clothes from. So I have like a fixed number of places that I will go to that I know will produce clothes that fit my frame and make me feel good about it. The other thing is, it sounds so simple, is that I wear clothes that fit me rather than wearing clothes that are slightly too tight or make me feel bad about myself, because if they're not comfortable, I'm just not going to want to wear them. And the final thing is, in the same way that, yes, absolutely, social media can be a generator for negative self-esteem and so on, it can be such a massively positive space for us connecting and us seeing images that make us feel good about ourselves. And I would say, very specifically to do with South Asian women, Instagram, for example, has been a game changer for me, just to see these gorgeous, beautiful women of all ages, all shapes, all sizes, all skin colors, in a way that is not represented in Bollywood, is not represented in the mainstream. But here these amazing women are, who are carving out their spaces. Yes, some of their followings may not be anywhere near, the mainstream influencers or whatever, but that doesn't matter, because they're doing their own thing and they're being authentic and true to who they are. And I look at their body sizes and I think, my body looks like that, yeah, that's the community that I'm kind of connecting with. And also just seeing other body sizes that don't look like my own, but that might have, might be another South Asian woman, I think are really, really important to just building up this idea that we're not a homogenous lump as a demographic. We are full of very vibrant, different women of all kind of abilities and intersections. And I think that that's a really important thing to remember, because growing up, especially at university, I thought that there was like one type of South Asian woman, and I did not look like her, and I was not like her, and I just felt like I didn't fit in anywhere. And now, at the grand old age of 41, I finally do feel like that.
And that's brilliant, isn't it? I suppose, yes, that is something that social media does. And I think if we didn't have that, we wouldn't see those people that looked like us or didn't look like us, but kind of made us feel like we didn't fit into the kind of skinny white woman stereotype, which clothes, yeah, I find that all the time. Most jeans don't fit me because I've got a curvaceous South Indian body, it's not going to fit into like a size 8 skinny jeans, is it? Yeah, absolutely. Um, Talking about South Asian women, would you like to give any advice that you might have for South Asian women listening to the podcast and listening to you?
South Asian women, I love you. And I think that we have had a tough road coming up in, especially I would say if you are based in the UK in a society where you may not feel fully reflected. But I am also so hopeful for the direction that we are going in. I would urge you to connect and follow and see like all of the incredible South Asian creatives that are coming up who are in their 20s, who have this gorgeousness and freedom and creativity about them. But I would also look to women who are older than us, who are paving their own way and deciding different futures for themselves than our own mothers and our grandmothers had. I'm really optimistic and hopeful about the future. And so I hope that you join me in feeling the same.
Thank you so much. That's really inspiring. Thank you.
Thanks, Sangeeta.
What projects have you got coming up? You were talking about your new book. Is there anything else that you...
Yeah, so my fiction is the main thing. That is coming out on the 7th of July. And
Ooh.
any support or help people listening can give around it, whether that's ordering it on pre-order or when it comes out in the bookshops would be great, because I think that it will hopefully speak to a lot of people. And I just feel like there are some incredible South Asian female writers who are already writing in the commercial fiction space. And I just think that this is a really joyous, funny, life-affirming edition. It's called In Case of Emergency.
Love the sound of that. So we'll be watching this space. We'll be watching out for your book and all the amazing things that you'll no doubt get up to. Thank you so much, Poorna. It's been an absolute joy talking to you. It's been worth waiting 2.5 years for.
Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.